welcome to Better Biz. A really serious conversation that we're going to have today is really around the idea of dealing with death. And it's something that we all have to deal with, but particularly a business that has to deal with it is a funeral home. And we've got Diane from Elite Funerals joining us today.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you for having me here.
Diane, when it comes to, trends, I guess, we hear a lot about the idea of an unattended cremation service. We hear people saying, "Oh, I don't really want a funeral." How do you address those kinds of issues? What's the response that you can give to families who come with that?
Yep. I don't really want a funeral. Why? There'll be a number of reasons, or any one of these reasons. They're worried that no one will turn up. They weren't loved enough. People don't have time for them. That could be a reason why. One I've experienced with a client is that when her first husband died, the club that he belonged to said that there'd be hundreds of people there and everyone from the club was going to come and all of these grandiose things were going to happen, and nobody came. So in planning her own funeral, her response to that is, I don't want a funeral, because she has a fear of that happening again. It could be that they don't want to burden their family with having to organise a funeral for them. But what they're actually doing is taking away a beautiful opportunity for their family to mourn them openly, with support of other family members and friends, to participate and to honour their life. I once had a girl whose father died suddenly. He died suddenly, and all she knew was that he didn't want a funeral. And she was really nervous when she rang up, and she said, I feel really bad asking this, but... And I interjected and I said, he didn't want a funeral, did he? And she said, no. And she told me the circumstances of his death, and that there were these 3 daughters. And I said, well, there's Dad who doesn't want a funeral, and then there's you guys. So how are we going to manage this? Dad ended up not having a funeral in the most simple coffin that you could ever imagine, an unfinished raw MDF coffin. But what he did have was his daughters come into the funeral home, sat by his closed coffin. We had a soundtrack of his life there. They had permanent markers, and I left them alone in the room once they were comfortable. And you could hear the laughter coming out of that room. And then after about half an hour or 3/4 of an hour, I just knocked on the door and I said, is everything all right? And they said, yeah, we're having a really good time here with Dad. And his whole coffin was adorned with all of these messages that they'd done in marker pens. And, we had a little chat for a while, and then they left, and Dad went off to the crematorium. So he didn't have a service, but he had those girls sitting in there with him. And you can tell by my face that it just brings laughter and joy to me when I think about it, because had they have just had nothing, they wouldn't have had that beautiful experience. I wouldn't have seen that beautiful experience. Makes me happy to think about it.
Diane, if people are interested in hearing more about the idea of a simple send-off, what do they need to do?
Simple Send-Off can be seen in its entirety on our website, elitefunerals.com.au, under Services, Arrange a Funeral Online. And you can work through all the steps there of choosing the crematoria, the coffin and flowers, and seeing the price in the top right-hand corner.